I watched Belly of an Architect last night for like the trillionth time.
Brian Dennehy.
Peter Greenaway is just such
so
a master, but
fucked
more
up.
importantly,
He's so fucked up.
he's a maniac. But
Hold the mic up a little bit more too.
Maniac, but
Peter
that
Greenaway
soundtrack that Vim Mertens did for Peter Greenaway's Belly of an Architect is just mind-blowingly good. It makes Philip Glass look like...
Let's insult Philip Glass. Yes.
Well, I mean, first of all...
I had him booked on the show. Thanks.
I like Philip Glass. I love his music, but it's interesting to listen to Philip Glass music now in that it's everywhere. So it's harder to take seriously in a film... like it feels so perfunctory and go-to at this point that
right.
like
there's a Philip Glass style. If it's not Philip Glass, there's a lot of people sort of imitating what he's doing.
Yeah,
essentially,
it's a lot of his music. I mean, I can't remember. How many times has someone licensed Einstein on the Beach and all this?
Certainly, every time you see an Errol Morris film.
Well, Bill Laswell just gave me a new copy of Koyanis Katsi that he remixed the score for. So it's a Bill Laswell score as opposed to the Philip Glass score.
But what's the deal?
It's the
No, I know the movie, but
it's what was just
the...
his take. Bill Laswell is one of the greatest music producers ever, obviously, and it's just different. It's the Bill Laswell version.
Yeah, are they releasing it with that?
I don't know.
Score
He just handed it off to me. I know he did it with. He didn't do it.
I'm
going to
go and redo all the.
He didn't do it for. I mean, he did that with Miles Davis. Obviously, he remixed Kind of Blue or Bitches Brew and.
A few of them, I think.
Yeah, he's done that for a bunch of people. Bob Marley, etc. But he did it for this movie. So I imagine that Bill Laswell will be releasing it. But regardless, it was it's more. I don't know. Philip Glass's piece for that is amazing. But what was the first movie that Philip Glass did the soundtrack to?
That might have been it. No, probably not. But that's one of the first. That's got to be going back because the Koyana Scottsy film.
No, there was like a film. I was watching it the other day. My friend said, "Oh, this is his first thing." Or I heard I was watching Death Wish the other day. Herbie Hancock score. I mean, that was his first score. Herbie Hancock's first score is Death Wish. Yeah, with Charles Bronson.
Charles Bronson, sure. Hope
that was Herbie Hancock's first score. I was blown away.
It is fun because you think of that, even that movie, even though it was the first of of the series of
Vigilantes.
But it was an early also. Yeah, but you think of that movie as kind of a B movie even then. But maybe
I mean, I wasn't.
Well, I do,
young.
but me too.
I might not even been alive. When did it come out? 70s or early 80s?
I think it was 70s. Right. And I remember my dad. He was crazy. He took me to these films, and he covered my eyes during the rape scene.
Right. Yeah, the rape.
It's so
scene.
disturbing.
The rape scene is disturbing, obviously, but what's funny is that it's a Jeff Goldblum. I tweeted him the other day after watching Death Wish, and it's his first acting role.
And he was one of the rapists?
Yeah, so I tweeted to him. He didn't respond, obviously, but I was like, out of all the women you had to pick at the grocery store, Goldblum, you had to choose Charles Bronson's wife. Death Wish.
You need to do a documentary about Jeff Goldblum. You'll probably get him. That's the good way to get him.
My friend just had a kid, and his name's Michael Benoit. He's my editor at GQ, and I was for the first time in my life, I was like, I call him every day. I'm like, you got to name your son Charles Bronson Benoit, all one word. Mm-hmm. He would not follow through. But anyway, he should have. It's a great first name, Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson Bulger. Maybe that'll be just my son. He'd just be the toughest dude raising vigilantes.
I'm raising a roost of vigilantes. Yeah. You better hope he is. It's a lot of pressure,
There's a lot of pressure, but a lot of people have forgotten about Charles Bronson these days. But I think Ginger Baker, the reason that I love Ginger and the reason why I was so interested in making this movie is because I grew up like loving the villains and the bad guys and the vigilantes and Ginger's
those on the margins.
Yeah, Ginger's like exactly, and he's a real life version of Marlowe from the Heart of Darkness. I mean, the guy's really one of those, he's up there with Peter Beard with, some of the greater adventurers. I mean, he drove the first Range Rover ever produced across the Sahara Desert and, went and lived with Fela Kuti while all the rest of the musicians of his time kind of sat back and rested on their laurels and went into Cheeseville. The early 80s stuff was late 70s. And him going to that heart of the motherland of the drum and pursuing his passion just so fearlessly like that. I was like, this guy's not just a musician; he's just a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. And then you caught that absolutely on film. How much of that goes necessarily along with the self-destruction?
I think they're in complete synchronicity. I think he is the physical. His life is in complete, in tandem with his music, and it's interesting. I was just thinking about. I've been thinking about it for a while, but I think I think he's like I think he has Asperger's, or something. I mean, he's able to communicate his life story and to relate to people. I think so much better, so much more profoundly with his music, and I think that's why he's great as friends and the people he admires, and his musical relationships are the greatest ones he's ever had. The self-destruction element. I mean, they based Animal from the Muppets on him. I mean, he smashes things, and maybe the smashes are more maybe he's more beautiful smashing, but at the end of the day, he's a drummer. They're maniacs. They're supposed to be.
Right. Maybe he also relates in the most pure sense to others while he's doing that. While he's been,
Most definitely, but he's just a walking he's such a contradictory person, and interestingly, I've always found talking to people musically, he doesn't dominate people. He is there for the sake of the music. He's not there, to be the front man. He's a classical drummer in that sense, but also, has pushed people to their maximum, output and musical capabilities. I don't think Clapton ever played like he did with Ginger. And by that, I mean just on a virtuosity level. I mean, from then on, he went Delaney and Bonnie and, his solo stuff, which was all great, but, it went back into a genre, which was blues. And I don't think Cream wasn't a genre when they started, I think, and when they were playing. I mean, they created a new type of music. I mean, they were Coltrane of, blues, rock, jazz, whatever. I mean, they were such a combination of so many different things, but mostly just musical virtuosity and experimentation at its highest.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you weren't around in the 70s, or you were maybe just born, but what were you brought up on?
I was brought up on that, with my dad just like hitting the steering wheel to Ginger Baker. And not specifically being like, this is Ginger Baker, but, Cream.
Yeah.
And I was really raised and honored to have been, bestowed upon me my dad's record collection. And so I just grew up with that music. And from really, I feel like my generation inherited this idea that Led Zeppelin was the greatest band that ever walked the face of the earth.
Right.
Which I think is unfair. I mean, they're great, but, you look at their first album, and it was like 9 out of 12 of them were blues covers that they never credited having completely ripped off. And, you look at like Cream stuff, which came so many years before them, and like Tales of Brave Ulysses and, White Room, and it was that combination of Pete Brown's poetic lyricism and their improvisational capabilities. But I think what was beautiful about Cream, which I think I was unfortunate to not participate in when I was younger, was just listening to the records. And, at a certain point I got into Grateful Dead too, and it was like their records just paled in comparison to what they did when they went on stage, because they never, the Cream never played the same song twice. I mean, they went up and they had a basic kind of outline that was the song that they had done in that studio, and then they would just play the 17-minute version of it where the three guys were just like, who can take it higher? They were like race cars, drifting back and forth in front of taking the lead and passing, and then at a certain point they just reached that kind of mutual symbiosis and where they just kind of exploded. And I think Carlos Santana said it the best, where he said it was supersonic music.
If you look at it within the context of where America is at generally, it's amazing that it reached any level of popularity in the United States,
right?
Because it's just never been a country that's embraced these types of styles of music or genres of music. except in a very subculture-ish.
Well, I think
you know.
now we've.
But they were huge for a moment in moment
band,
time.
yeah, they were the biggest band in America for a while. Yeah, for two years. They were only around for 2 years, but during those 2 years, they just. I mean, they were the first supergroup. They were the first band that played in arenas. They were the first jam band. They were, I guess, they were the first of a lot of things. But I think they would be the first to tell you that they were all inspired heavily by many different musical, forefathers. And I just hear Coltrane with them. I love Coltrane, but like that, the Elvin Jones with the back and forth between that, it felt like they took the baton from them and went to the next level. And I think the interesting thing about that is, Tony Williams played with Miles Davis, and I think he was envious of what Ginger was doing with Cream, and that's when he started Lifetime. I think he wanted to be Tony and Williams probably revered Ginger as much as Ginger revered Tony Williams.
Sounds as though not only within the band were they upping each other's games, but almost like cross genres, that they were like pushing each other. They were both mutually influenced and inspired, is maybe even a better way of putting it.
I don't think Tony Williams cared about Led Zeppelin, let's put it that way, but I know he was heavily, inspired by Cream.
Yeah.
And he went and played music with Jack Bruce from Cream.
Mm-hmm.
And, Lifetime.
I think one of the reasons why people have responded on the festival circuit anyway, to Beware of Mr. Baker, first time we're mentioning it, the name of the film today, but the where that, why people are responding, because I think there is I think your film doesn't lose sight of the music, which is your way in, as opposed to, frankly, the tabloid nature of the subject, which you could have certainly. I've had a number of people who have made films. Well, he is kind of like does that himself enough. Right? I mean, when I don't want to give away too much, but the moment that opens the film and closes it, more or less, is a good example of that. People will have to just see the movie to know what I'm referring to. But
I mean, when he breaks my nose with a cane.
Yes. Yeah,
you can see that in the previews, though. It's no secret.
Oh, okay. I forgot.
It's not a secret.
I haven't looked at the previews. I watched.
Well, he does enough of. Yeah, he makes a caricature of himself, and he's good at.
I mean,
being larger than life.
He can't. It's an impulse he can't suppress. Yeah. But to your credit and to the film's, I think, advantage, we know that this is a musician of a
hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
The music and
he's not a clown.
No. He's not. He's
a sad figure. He's a sad figure, but it's like, oh my God, the gift.
Well, I think the unfortunate thing for me that's really been bumming me out at times is when people have been leaving the movie and they've been judging the film based on whether they would want him to be their father. And that's not what the movie's about. Like, if you really got into Mozart, you probably wouldn't want him to be. You sure as hell probably wouldn't want Miles Davis to be your father. But you know what I mean? People are so. It's interesting. Look, I wouldn't compare my movie to Citizen Kane at all, but like, at the end of the day, Citizen Kane is an incredibly unlikable character, and then we find out he lost his sled. I mean, it's my film, same situation. I mean, you have a guy who grew up in East London, and when he was born, the Nazis started bombing his house. And then they killed his dad, and they created a villain. And, I think he's recreated that trauma throughout his life. But, his musical adventure is unprecedented. I mean, just over the time, and he's old enough that he would, 50s jazz and bebop to now, and he's covered all of those genres and been on the forefront of every, played with Pill with Johnny Rotten and Bill Laswell in the 80s. And then it goes 360 back to, playing with Charlie Hayden, Ornette Coleman's bassist, with Bill Frisell, the great jazz guitarist, and then starting his own band. And, look, after Ginger Baker's Air Force were...
That's incredible. That's an incredible segment of the film.
Avant-garde band. And, he was what is that? I mean, still to this day, you listen to it. It's not... You don't listen to it. I don't listen to it and think, oh, that's like hippie 60s music. As Ginger would say, now they call it fusion. Mm-hmm. You can't put my movie into a fucking box, Jay. You can't put it into the box because he was doing it before there was a box to be had, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And I think
Right.
that's a beautiful
A true
part of it.
pioneer in that sense, and
But restless and, you know, continuously looking
Right.
to redefine the genre. And as a result, I think that relates, you know, it's complete, you know, it's the same thing he does with his life, you know, like come in, master, dominate, command, then when people leave and smash people in the face with a cane so I don't have to emotionally deal with the withdrawal, start all over again.
Let's cut this short. Right, it's sort of he's preemptively cutting the relationship or killing it in no sense.
Could have never played in, you know, the Who and been like the Who, you know, playing the same type of music forever with the same guys. I mean, he's constantly, his foot is tapping. He needs to implode and start over musically, family wise.
Well, he has no choice often too, because he sort of left a trail of dust behind him every time he moved to South Africa to escape essentially, and then he, you know, got restless, as you put it, and starts Air Force, and which is this incredible thing if you think about how he can pull this together in a country that in which he is a foreigner. And
Fela Kuti, I mean, that stuff is unbelievable. But it's
and then becomes a god to them. He's an icon to all these different.
But Ginger was like, you know, Ginger was the well-known musician of the two. I mean, Fela Kuti was a brilliant guy, but he wasn't a virtuoso of music. He was a band leader in the finest sense of the word, and you know, Ginger came in right there and was just immediately like, interestingly enough, went there to the motherland of the drum to explore his instrument and showed up there, and, you know, the white guy is there and he's a master of a certain type of music, and then, you know, they grow up. I mean, you're born into polyrhythms in Africa, you know, it's an interesting thing, and it's not a rock and roll's 4/4. You know, he went there to discover new rhythms.
So we're speaking with Jay Bulger, who is the director of Beware of Mr. Baker. It's a new documentary about the drummer, musician, Ginger Baker.
We're playing at the Film Forum.
At the Film Forum.
Starting the 28th of November. And it'll be here for 2 weeks, and it'll be
great.
in Los Angeles, and we're doing our, like, Academy Award qualifying thing or whatever, which I don't know why. I'm not in charge.
Of deciding whether you're going to be nominated? Or?
I don't know. It's not up to me, obviously, and it's not my goal. It would be fun, I guess, but you know, it's a movie about a musician and not about someone who saves, you know, orphans in Lake Tanganyika. So
he may have saved some souls. You never know. Where in Los Angeles is your? Is it playing? Doesn't matter. I can look at it.
But it'll be back hopefully in all these cities.
Yeah.
In January when we do our wide release.
Very good. So
you know,
the qualifying screenings,
all this stuff.
But 2 weeks at Film Forum is great.
Hopefully it'll be continued. Hopefully it'll continue here too. You know, depending on what the response is. I guess I don't know how that works, but I'm hoping that it'll, you know, do well, and especially because what you were saying. I mean, the reason I was excited and honored to make this film is that I hope people from my generation watch this film and do realize just how, you know, incapable and simplistic, and the musicianship right now are, you know, it's defined by people who are just part of this machine. They aren't musical masters like they were in Ginger's day. My generation, I felt like we're from a real void in musical artistry, and it's unfortunate, but I'm honored to be telling a tale of people who were at the height of their powers and musical capabilities, and Clapton at his height of experimentation.
What does Ginger Baker make of rap music or hip hop? Have you ever talked to him about that?
Well, you know, Ginger's married to a black woman, and he's lived in Africa so I mean, he's hugely interested and influenced by African American culture. I think he's not an expert, but he's like, I love Snoopy Dogg, you know. Like,
but I think he sees a kinship more than maybe he relates to. Do you know? Because there's a lot of bad boys. It's a whole sort of bad boy sort of ethic.
So. I mean, he loves Kelly Rowland.
He does.
Yeah, he loves Kelly Rowland.
That's curious. Maybe he just likes her shape.
She's beautiful.
Cute.
Yeah.
She's beautiful.
I think he's impressed.
I worked at Sony Music for years, actually, and for 10 years, and back in the mid to 90s to the mid aughts, and Destiny's Child would come through the. I would see them riding. I'd ride the elevator with them. They come to the. Oh my goodness! You know what? As a little,
I just wrote the covers.
They were a quartet, by the way, at the time, because they would walk around these cute girls together, and they were just a pretty girl group. I never really had a chance to say, "Oh, that's Beyonce."
Right.
There's Kelly Rowland,
right?
And then the Christian one, but yeah, they were. I mean, very cute.
I just wrote the cover story for GQ this month about Rihanna, and I was
impressed
by her. You know, I really like her. You know, she's interesting, but still, she doesn't. You know, it's. I just wonder what we're lacking. What are the residual effects of being a part of society where, you know, and 20 years ago it was Motown musicians at the top of the charts, and you know everything is becoming more and more centralized behind these multi-million-dollar corporations as opposed to spreading the money out and giving independent music a chance. You know, everything's becoming so much more polarized. I think as far as the music companies go, right?
Oh, certainly. I mean, that's a big conversation that I could definitely go off on a tear about. Don't start me. One thing I did want to ask before we stop, and that is, I don't really doubt you're going to get some good reviews, and those are nice and they help. And let's continue for another week or two.
As long as people get to go see the movie. You know?
Well, that will certainly, make people aware that it is around and that it exists. Those good
especially
reviews.
Because it's so important to
get more press,
you
get more interviews.
It's a musical experience, you know. And
yeah. But I'm wondering the question is, I guess, and it's nice to hear from people how much they enjoyed the film. But most of all, of course, I would imagine as a filmmaker making a movie about a particular individual, that their reaction might mean the most to you on a personal level.
Right.
Like their validation of the film. And I know from having been at a Q&A that Ginger has seen the film.
Oh, you saw my Q&A with Ginger?
No, I was at the Q&A.
Ginger
You won the audience, so you won like the documentary. He has not seen it.
He refuses to watch.
Oh, he refuses. For some reason, I guess I thought he had seen it, but
no, I sent it to him. But
we'll rephrase the question.
I sent it to him. Ginger Baker still hasn't seen the movie, and it's an interesting thing to being on stage with him because I was in London with him 2 weeks ago, and he's answering questions about a movie he hasn't seen.
Well, he was in it.
But he's in it. But at first he was like, why do I need to watch it? I lived it. And now he's admitted to me, which I agree with, and I understand, I empathize, is, how do you watch a movie where, you lose everything so many times over, and the last wounds are still fresh. I mean, he now lives in London in a shack with one dog. And the movie, we filmed...
Where's his wife?
He's still got his wife, but, he had 38 Apollo horses and 12 dogs and an 80-acre property with his own polo field and stables, and he was living like a king, and that was just 2 years ago. So I see why he doesn't want to relive that. It's depressing. He didn't expect to live this long, so that's the really annoying part.
Yeah,
he's like, damn it!
I don't think his doctors
he's outlived his money
anyone.
Again. With the Cream Reunion money. He spent $5 million in 5 years.
No, I know. I remember. Yeah, so it's
squandered. Well, who needs 38 polo ponies? He could probably have been fine with 3.
Yeah, 3 would have been a nice number. Yeah. He may not have been able to...
12 times more of that, even over that, yeah.
It's crazy.
So
therein lies the...
wait, what was the question?
Just his having seen it, but it...
So he hasn't seen it, but not
but he's doing
because
Q&As
he's not
with
interested.
You, so. It's painful. Like I had the same thing.
It's painful.
Cutting it off. Well, it was the same thing with Paul. To make an interesting comparison, which was also occurred during the South by Southwest festival, was the Paul Williams. This is is still alive. No, he's the singer-songwriter from the 70s. Who
right.
We've Only Just Begun and a bunch of other light music songs, but very complex guy, and certainly had his battle with addiction and.
Right.
It's very painful because there's footage of him just acting really
Yeah.
obnoxious and
you know,
and he found it very hard to watch. I mean,
bet.
his instinct. He was going around helping promote it with the filmmaker. I'm like,
Right.
but
Where's that Sugarman guy? Like he should be happy because the guy didn't, expose him, personally and really at all. You don't really get to know him. It's just about his story of music, which
right. That's a little bit more complicated.
What, the Sugarman guy?
Yeah, he's
more complicated than
I interviewed him. He's incoherent.
He's incoherent, right?
Some degree. So to some degree, he's totally there, and he's genuine, and he's genuine guy, and
he's a guy.
He's in the moment.
One album, I just don't care.
Maybe two or three, but he was. I don't know how he ended up being such a huge influence.
How he became famous. I made my movie in South Africa.
I know,
and I just look, they're totally different films, but Ginger's like one of the great, most important, innovative musicians of the 20th century. He's made hundreds of albums, and I think that if there was a difference between Ginger and that guy, it's Ginger would have made music in his basement alone, and he would have just smashed stuff to infinity because that's all he knows how to do. And I think that guy's second album is indicative of that person's drive to make music. I liked his first album, but a lot of people have great first albums.
True. It's a lot of years.
Shuggy Otis's album is just a transformational information or whatever it is. Inspirational information.
So, yes.
He's a great story. Someone should do that story too. Well, anyway, I'm glad that he got his due. That person, but that Sugarman guy, but Ginger's story is God, man, it's so crazy. I'm just honored
glad
to
you
just
did it.
like landed on my lap. But I mean, he's just we're talking 5 continents, 5 wives, every genre of music, so many rock stars and musicians and jazz masters that I've always wanted to be part of. That I always grew up in being inspired by, that he has influenced. I mean, he's just the face melter.
Well, thanks for coming by and for being on Filmwax Radio, Jay Bulger. Again, the film is Beware of Mr. Baker, and it's at the Film Forum for 2 weeks in New York, and I urge you to go see it, and it's highly entertaining.
I really appreciate you having me on the show. Please check out the film because, his musical journey is important.
It is. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.